Chapter 6. Enter Mr. Lee. When Confederate General Joseph Johnston is wounded defending the Virginia Peninsula against McClellan's advance, President Davis replaces him with Robert E. Lee. Confederate fortunes ascend quickly. Lee proves to be a superb field commander who uses his cavalry and daring to repeatedly defeat a much larger and better equipped foe. July 2nd, 1862.
A stunning reversal of fortunes has occurred over the past 7 days and through 6 major battles fought along the Virginia Peninsula. Confederate General Robert E. Lee drove the invading Union Army of the Potomac, commanded by Major General George B. McClellan, away from Richmond and into a retreat. General Lee assumed command of the Army of Northern Virginia only 1 month ago. For more on who is General Lee, let's go to Danielle Burke in Richmond.
General Robert E. Lee hails from a prominent military family and background. His father was a Revolutionary War officer, and Lee himself was a top graduate and then superintendent of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. He distinguished himself during the Mexican-American War and commanded the troops at Harper's Ferry who captured John Brown and his followers. Lee was appointed colonel of the 1st Regiment of Cavalry in March 1861 by the new president, Abraham Lincoln. 3 weeks later, Colonel Lee was offered the rank of Major General in the expanding army to fight the southern states that had left the Union. When Virginia seceded, Lee chose Virginia and resigned from the army on April 20th. Southern editorials immediately objected to this appointment, describing him as timid. This may be partly due to Lee's outspoken objection to the secession at the beginning of the war, denouncing it as revolution and a betrayal of the efforts of the founders. Lee stated, "I can anticipate no greater calamity for the country than a dissolution of the Union."
July 10th, 1862.
Over the past 2 weeks, both North and South demonstrated an extraordinary capacity to fight on despite persistent stress and exhaustion. Casualties have been very high for both armies. After a successful start on the peninsula that foretold an early end to the war, Northern morale has taken a body blow from McClellan's retreat. But, as we have seen throughout the conflict, President Lincoln seems to dig deeper after Union setbacks.
This war can no longer be fought with elder stock squirts charged with rose water. This government cannot much longer play a game in which it stakes all, and its enemies stake nothing. Those enemies must understand that they cannot experiment for 10 years trying to destroy the government, and if they fail, still come back into the Union unhurt. It is time that they should begin to feel the presence of the war. I expect to maintain this contest until successful, or till I die or am conquered, or my term expires, or Congress or the country forsakes me.
July 18th, 1862.
President Lincoln and the 37th Congress have been very busy implementing a wide-sweeping Republican agenda for the United States and to take the war to a new level of urgency. Over the past fortnight, the president has called for 300,000 new military volunteers, signed legislation to impose a 3% internal revenue tax on incomes in excess of $600, signed the Pacific Railroad Act to build a transcontinental railroad, approved a bill to donate public lands to states and territories for colleges of agriculture and mechanic arts, approved the Anglo-American Treaty that suppresses African slave trade. Yesterday, President Lincoln signed an act authorizing the seizure and confiscation of rebel property to, quote, suppress the insurrection and punish those guilty of treason and rebellion, end quote. Congress further authorized conscription and acceptance of Negroes into military and naval services, a move which is sure to distance any hope of conciliation with Southern leaders.
The tone is no different across the Confederacy, especially when people realized how many soldiers were lost in the recent victories. There is widespread concern that the Confederate war strategy must change because the South cannot match the North in terms of men and material. The Charleston Mercury demanded, "Our victorious troops in Virginia, reduced though they be in numbers, must be led promptly into Maryland." Confederate leaders believe a successful invasion of the North might lead to Democratic gains in the upcoming elections and thereby weaken political support for the war effort.
My early declared purpose and continued hope was to feed upon the enemy and teach them the blessings of peace by making them feel, in its most intangible form, the evils of war. The time and place for invasion has been a question of not of will, but of power. Never having preferred defensive to offensive war, but rather pined for the day when our soil should be free from invasion and our banners float over the fields of the enemy, we stand upon the defensive no more. When it is in our power to inflict injury upon our adversary, a proposal of recognition to the United States would show conclusively to the world that our sole object is the establishment of our independence and the attainment of an honorable peace. The proposal of peace would enable the people of the United States to determine at their coming elections whether they will support those who favor a prolongation of the war or those who wish to bring it to termination.
Men have their choice in this world. They can be angels, or they may be demons. Just what takes place in individual human hearts often takes place between nations and between individuals of the same nation. Such is the struggle now going on in the United States. The slaveholders had rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. To fight against slaveholders without fighting against slavery is but a half-hearted business, and paralyzes the hands engaged in it. The strength of the rebels, the vigor with which they prosecute the war, the deadly hate towards the North, the employment of slaves to do the drudgery of the rebel army and to shoot down the government troops, the fact that this is a slaveholders' rebellion and nothing else, all point out slavery as the thing to be struck down as the best means of the successful and permanent establishment of the peace and prosperity of the nation.